we are, obviously. Everything's a little blockier here than our normal streams. Mostly because I need to turn on auto loot right now. Have you done that?
Yeah.
Okay,
There's a high
because
probability that while we are at level 1 with no, if unless you bought the bobbers, you're just not going to catch fish for a lot of these casts. So,
sounds great. It's perfect. Well, this is Fishing and Talking Blocky Edition for sure.
yeah, you may notice as
Taking it
you
back.
pan around here, this isn't the org you might know and love from the current version of the game you're playing.
Or you might be the person who's looking at it going, this is the org that I know and love from the older version of the game. Perhaps that is you. Perhaps it is not. That's kind of the big question and debate, I think, right now. It's not debate so much, but it's sort of an interesting new development in kind of World of Warcraft as a franchise and as a game. Is that we've got, essentially two, I don't know, would you call them competing versions of the game right now?
Um, I mean, it's effectively two different games, but I know that the design philosophy that they talked about at BlizzCon was that Blizzard absolutely did not want to be actively developing two games. Um, so in terms of
Makes sense. I
design
mean,
philosophy and whatnot, I mean it's a game designed and thought about from an era of 15 years ago.
right.
Um, it certainly caters to different playstyles and different audiences to a degree, but I don't know. That was a long answer to say yes and no, I guess.
Yes and no. Yeah. And I think that's kind of, something we can look at and get into generally. Obviously, I think right now, I mean, my perception in general, so again, we're coming from two different kind of experience points here where I am not really super active in live right now because there's not much going on. I think that's kind of, you know, in, not unusual. I think a lot of people are that way.
Yeah, I mean, and if you watched our last fishing and talking
Right.
chat, we were talking about how we're in the lull waiting for 8.2.
Yeah,
So
just kind of waiting around, which has been interesting because there's been a lot of beta news and streams and a lot of engagement, obviously. There's been a lot of talk about the success of this kind of beta as an engagement point for World of Warcraft, which is somewhat interesting. But also, as far as experience goes, I trialed in BC and I think I've really started hitting the road in Lich King. So this is, aside from neither confirming nor denying any experience on private servers. This is pretty much the first experience for me in legit, straight up, yum yum vanilla classic.
well, I mean, the
Whereas you,
reality
Kaz,
is, even the people that played private servers extensively, that was a game that was designed or run by people that were trying to remember the vanilla code and doing their best to simulate it. And a lot of, like, if you watch any of the popular streamers that exist, they're noticing a lot of things that are different, which they initially were reporting as bugs, but Blizzard is coming out and saying straight up, no, that's the way Classic worked. It was just coded different on private servers, for instance,
yeah,
drop rates and things like that. So, private
yeah,
server experience aside, that was not Classic, that was not vanilla. This is a true, genuine reproduction of the game that launched in 2004 and
yeah,
effectively changed the MMO genre.
nice. So, as a general outline, I think we'll kind of look at as I was telling Kaz before we started. It feels like there's kind of a past, present, future situation when you're talking about. I mean, you know, Chromie throwing us back now 15 years or whatever.
Yeah.
I officially will go on record saying that is the lore that I subscribe to, that Chromie has taken us back to make things right. I don't know exactly what we need to make right, but
I'm just viewing it as I'm waking up from a nightmare and finding myself back in the version of Azeroth that I remembered so fondly. Just
I think
carrying on
before we
with my
kind of,
warlock life.
yeah. Oh, what a nightmare for you, Kaz. I'm so sorry that you're in such a
Yeah, the Warlords of Draenor stage of that dream was pretty terrible.
so I guess before we get into that kind of present, past, future, I think, I mean, uh, I think it's interesting at least to talk about kind of the beta experience right now. I mean, as far as how is it going? Is it successful? Is it, what we expected? The thing that I'm initially feeling is that You were just talking about the difference between live server or private servers and classic, and I'd say I feel pretty impressed and happy with the team and the way that they've been able to resurrect this. Pretty much, probably I'd say 92%, true to classic.
I'd say much more than that. Like with the amount of
Really,
stuff that's
even?
in the game, yeah. Like in terms of its accuracy to the original game, we're looking at like a 98% replication, and then the 2% that's different is
It's just like
conscious decisions that I don't think many people have issue with. Like,
like BNet and stuff like that. And
yeah, I mean the BattleNet integration is a convenience thing from like a server side or whatever, having all your games in one place. Like that doesn't change the gameplay experience, being able to
right.
launch it from there.
Yeah,
And with the BattleNet comes the authenticator, which means account security and stuff like that. So I guess if you're looking for the true vanilla experience where your account gets hacked, all your gold disappears, and then you find out that your name's been changed to Chinese characters and you're selling a bunch of ore on the auction house, then yeah, you're gonna miss out on that. But like
I do love that.
anybody that's happened to, you're not gonna miss that. Like, believe me,
Right.
because it happened to me. Um,
Yes. Yes, definitely. But I do think it's impressive, at least, to see it actually roll out and hit the road and the funny bug reports that Blizzard's like, no, working as
yeah, yeah,
intended.
the
Like,
not bug reports.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I think like that's a really impressive execution of, what I guess the sort of, resurrection philosophy was, which is vanilla,
Yeah.
classic is classic,
Yeah, I
which
mean
I,
the
I
big changes, the big deterrence from the or the big, I guess the biggest sticking point that people are having is that Blizzard has taken the approach of looking at the patch cycle of Classic, went through 12 major patches, and they looked at the version 1.12 as kind of their Rosetta Stone, if you will,
right, right,
of Classic. And so this entire engine, this entire experience is based off of 112 scaling. So in terms of ability strength, talent trees,
all the balancing and
class
the
stuff, items. It's built with the 112 model in mind, and then they're going to have a 6 stage release cadence in terms of like the release of Molten Core, Blackwing Lair, AQ, Arathi, or Altric Valley, Battlegrounds, Dire Maul, and then ultimately ending in stage 6 with getting the Naxxramas release. But
right,
everything, like, we're not going to see the changes to class tuning that Vanilla saw in terms of its patch cycles. It's just Warlocks will have these abilities from the get go with these strengths, and you're
yeah,
going to have that scaling going through. So I'd say that's the biggest difference between Vanilla and Classic, is that you're getting a more polished class tuning, which does in some ways change the meta. But like that in mind, because of those decisions they made, like you said, it has been very smooth. I've been incredibly
yeah,
impressed with the beta thus
yeah,
far.
yeah. Um, before we even get even further, I'm really curious to talk about this and kind of your thoughts because I thought it is sort of funny and interesting that we're running this beta. They're trying to test some systems that are new and fresh, namely the notorious. It's not called phasing. It's called
Layering.
layering, right? And so anyone who spent any time in freaking Kalimdor, especially like Barons or pretty much all of Kalimdor, it seems, have experienced some like insanity layering problems and getting DC'd and a whole bunch of stuff like that. I think it's crazy.
Yep.
Um, I found it interesting. It seemed like a lot of people were like upset about that in a game that's in beta. Do you know what I mean?
Well, so
But
yeah, I mean, like there are some people that fundamentally disagree. So that is one of the changes they made. I so the biggest argument is something that you may or may not know at home, if you haven't played vanilla, is that vanilla WoW, you logged on to a tune on a server and you only interacted with people on your server. There was no cross realm, there was no phasing. So if I was on Spirestone, which is where my original Warlock existed, I did not run into people from Illidan. I did not run into people um, from Terran Mill. I didn't run into people from Ragnaros. Like, they didn't exist in my world because there was no cross realm integration. And they plan to preserve that experience in Classic. The problem is that at launch we fully anticipate a whole bunch of people, and this is jumping ahead in terms of the future of the game,
yeah,
but they're optimistically anticipating that there is going to be a bunch of people that want to play Classic at launch. Because if
I
you
think
pay
that's
for a WoW
understandable.
sub, you get
Yeah.
Classic for free.
Right.
So it's like there's probably a lot of people that have never seen Classic that are interested in like what is this hype about? What does this game look like? The problem is if you get a gigantic server full of people, right? And let's say 3/4 of them decide the Classic is not for them, which I don't think is an unrealistic potential number.
Yeah.
You go from having a full server to a dead server in 6 months.
Right.
What layering theoretically will do will allow them to effectively run. I don't know how many layers they plan on having, but let's say for an arbitrary number, 5 layers. So if I log on and they're going to change the server names, but like we log on to the Orgrimmar server, and there's 5 layers of the org server, all of them running at max capacity. As people quit the game, Blizzard then removes the layers, and basically we get cross realm within a server. So as the server population shrinks, you still have a populated server. It helps streamline the launch experience so that you don't have to put too many people in any given zone. Similar to phasing, if I am out questing and I want to do Wailing Caverns out in the Barrens, I invite you to come heal for me, and you're on a different layer. It will phase you into my layer, and you'll be able to communicate and play and do all the stuff with me in that
Yeah.
layer.
Similar to that tech that exists in
Yeah.
live, but
The issue that people have is like, well, that means when I log in, if I'm not grouping up with people, it could be months until I see Troll God X on my server,
yeah.
like, and I don't even know that he exists.
Right.
People that are trying to stream snipe streamers, I guess, are upset that they might not be able to find him. Blah 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 blah. So
That's some fun
yes,
stuff.
yes, it is sort of a cross realm thing, but I think like Blizzard is faced with a losing battle either way because you don't have layering, you
Right.
overload your servers. If the stress test showed us anything, it's that a lot of people are super hyped about it, and the servers still the technology doesn't exist to support that many people in one given place. So you
Right.
create layering, you ease the server load, and then you allow for a healthier server population long term. The flip side is you don't do that. You have potential server crashes. Like if you played vanilla, if you want the truly authentic vanilla experience,
Right.
it gets
Go
to the
show
point
up
where the
at
servers are
opening
down.
of AQ.
Well,
Yeah.
no, just play the game. There was periods of time Tuesday would hit, they would do server maintenance, and the game would be literally offline for 36 hours. It was to the point where, like, if you didn't play vanilla, you probably don't even know this, but it was to the point where in vanilla, servers would be down for maintenance or would just crash randomly for so long that people were complaining, "Hey, I'm paying a monthly sub, and I'm getting
Right.
X number of days removed." To the point that Blizzard literally added game time on. So if my subscriptions like renewed on the 23rd and they had a long maintenance period that took the servers offline for an extended period of time, they would give me 2 free days. So now I don't pay for a new sub until the 25th. Like that doesn't exist in the game now
Right,
because the
right.
serviceability wasn't around. So like they're introducing this tech and whatnot. I mean, yes, it takes away from the vanilla experience, but that's probably only for what the first 3 months, 6 months. How long is it going to take for the people that truly aren't into vanilla to realize Classic's not for them and for them to bail on the game? Because their ultimate goal is probably, I think, is by phase 2 for layering to not exist.
Right.
People will have weeded themselves out, the game will have stabilized, and the server populace will be what it is, and you will see anybody in the world that exists on your server. They're going to be there, and you're just going to experience them. So
Right.
yes, it's a point of contention. Yes, it is a difference. But like I'm on the side with Blizzard. Like they truly can't win. You can't make everybody happy. But I think
Right.
the best possible solution is the one that's going to provide stability for the game and is
Exactly.
going to
At least.
maintain a healthy server population. I think
Right.
if they can get the now this is the other side of things. If they can get the technology working correctly, because like you said, in the
Yeah.
beta test, which is what beta testing is for,
Exactly.
we
Let's
were
all
having
remember that.
we were having lots of experiences of random DCs in the Barrens. They were experimenting with the layering technology where I would find myself randomly effectively phasing because all of a sudden everything I was fighting would despawn mid-fight and all the shit was there because I was being pushed to another layer.
Yeah.
I
Exactly.
don't know, is that Blizzard turning some knobs and testing some stuff? If that is,
Right.
great, they're experimenting. But if they were hands off and layering is supposed to be running like freeform and I'm randomly being phased, then I reported that as a bug, and that is
Right.
something that needs to be addressed before the live game launches, because
Right.
that's not something you want happening for a truly
Exactly.
vanilla experience. So yeah, it's a
Right.
beta test. We're testing things for a reason. We're identifying bugs and we're helping fix it so when the game actually goes live,
Yeah.
you don't have the experiences that I had fighting Quillbores, where all of a sudden
Exactly.
I had cleared out a
Get
thing to get to a
murdered by
chest, and then all of a sudden
Quill-
everything respawns around me, murders me, and it takes 15 minutes to run back to my corpse. That's
and the
not fun.
chest despawns.
Yeah, and the
The
chest wasn't on that layer. Yeah, exactly.
right,
So,
exactly.
so yeah, yeah. Long diatribe, long talk about layering, but that's my understanding of it, how it's going to work, in my opinion. I think it's a good thing if it works the way that they describe it. And we're
Yeah.
gonna see.
Yeah. Um, I do think it's been a good beta. I think they're close. I think it's going to be an interesting time coming up in August. Um, this is not necessarily a classic retrospective discussion, but I do find it interesting that somehow vanilla. So here's an interesting thought. I wonder, vanilla has had this sort of history. 15 years ago it was a huge, amazing, cool jump from the Warcraft 3 universe to feel
Yep.
like I'm actually immersing myself into this
It
game.
was an absolutely groundbreaking game. I mean, EverQuest existed before. There's still EverQuest fanboys. I know of Dawes, if
Right.
you're out there, like you love EverQuest, and that was arguably the first no life game. But
Right.
Vanilla was a dumbed down version, which is crazy to say considering how
I know,
complex it
because
is.
people are like, this is terrible,
But
it's so
yeah,
hard. You're
but
like,
the steps they took in terms of making it easier than EverQuest, I think, was the right amount. Where like EverQuest, I don't know, I don't have the data, but
right.
like in terms of their active player base, I don't think it was ever anywhere close to what like Vanilla like climbed exponentially until Wrath, where we were talking tens of millions of active players. Like that's
Right.
insane for a
Right.
game that requires the amount of time that it takes to play and
To,
whatnot.
right. Right. And so I find that interesting. I would love to see the data and the statistics on, the kinds of people that over the last 3 or 4 years have been super adamant and chanting and yelling at Blizz and hating on live and wanting classic and doing private servers. I'd be really, really fascinated to see the kind of statistics as far as age, when they played, what their experience was like, because it feels like, I mean, this is maybe, I don't know, it feels like something that's broader than even WoW or even entertainment, but that there's this kind of sense, like globally, of feeling like we want to go back to something that we remember so
I mean,
fondly, and
nostalgia
I
is
want
certainly popular right now.
right.
When you look at E3, how many of the games that were announced were remakes? I mean, I saw Battletoads announced in
Yeah,
E3,
which
a game that I
nobody
played
asked for, I
on
thought.
the
Yeah.
NES Classic. Like
Right.
we're seeing Star Wars remakes. We're remaking all kinds of shit. We're bringing
All
back
the
Bill
Final
and Ted
Fantasies
3.
every time.
Final
Yeah.
Fantasy VII's being remastered. Like it's
Oh, is
this
CD
weird thing.
Projekt Red doing Bill and Ted? Is
I
that
don't
right?
I maybe that sounds right. I don't even know. No. But like
Made a Keanu Reeves.
yeah, it's yeah, seriously. But it's this funny thing where like creativity right now revolves around taking the things that like I remember as a kid and somehow like bringing them back. I don't know. I feel like I'm being catered to, but like
Yeah.
it certainly is a weird phenomenon. In terms of statistics and stuff, I don't know that we'll ever actually have hard,
I know.
fast numbers. The closest thing
Right.
that we can look at is you can look at viewer count on Twitch. And when
Right.
the beta went live, World of Warcraft was the number one viewed game, beating out Fortnite, IRL, all that shit. And there were more people watching WoW than anything else. And when you looked at it, I think you had to go to like 15 before you found somebody actually streaming BFA. It was all classic streamers at
Right.
that point in
Right.
time. So that shows there's
I
certainly
think
an amount of
understandable, right.
interesting, and that doesn't mean that the game's going to be successful, but it means that it's the first look that the world as a whole had outside of the demo you got from BlizzCon that was like 3 levels
Right.
in the Barrens.
Right.
So like there's people that are interested in it. The other thing that you can look at is like you look at Nestarius is probably the most well known, but you got Elysium, you got Chronos, like all the private servers. Nestarius boasted hundreds of thousands of players, and those are people that are going out of their way, technically violating the terms of service to go back and play a game that wasn't being supported anymore. So like if people are willing to go against the TOS, risk their live accounts, get themselves potentially in trouble,
Right.
I say risk, like ultimately it's probably not a huge deal, and some people
Right.
don't look at it. But like, I think there's a lot of people that never played Nestarius or whatever because they knew that it was something Blizzard didn't want. If like now you create Classic, like if you get those same hundreds of thousands plus however many that are going to jump
Right.
on board, like that's certainly a number to look at. You look at the rise of YouTube videos and stuff; it's all
Right.
classic content. You look at guys like Venruki, like going back to the Twitch thing, he's got the highest number of subscribers in his career, and he's been around. He's a former BlizzCon champion. He's been playing World of Warcraft PvP for ages, but
Right.
he's reached his peak playing on the beta and just playing around on Mage and having an absolute blast on it. And he's got more
Yeah.
supporters and subscribers than he's ever had playing the live game. So, like, there's not hard and fast numbers, but you can look at various numbers across the spectrum, and you're certainly going to find that I think there
Yeah.
is a lot of hype around
Hmm.
Classic, and I think you're going to find a lot of people are excited. And the other thing that's interesting to look at is when you look at the beta invites that went out, they were
Right.
either influential streamers, which I know a lot of people have issues with, but if you're a Blizzard like a person that's actually looking for exposure, like it's the smartest business model they can do. If
Right.
you want mass exposure, you want to build hype for a game, and you want to get as much eyes on stuff to potentially report bugs or
Right.
provide
Or somebody
feedback on the
can. Yeah.
forums, find a streamer. Put Asmongold on there. You got 30,000 eyes now looking at a game that's in beta testing, and even if they're not playing the game, they're providing feedback in terms of, oh, this looks cool, or I can't believe they changed that. So even without playing the
Right.
game, one beta invite has resulted in I don't know how much feedback on the forums or whatever. So
Right.
you
It's a
can't
very
fault that.
effective invite as far as, yeah, as far
And
as like
with
bang for your buck.
and with the thousands of keys that went out or whatever, not keys because it wasn't like an actual key, but the thousands of invites that went out or whatever,
Right.
the number of streamers constitutes a very small percentage. But the people like in the guild that I was in, like somebody was asking around, I'm in Tips Out Baby's guild.
Right.
Home, and I was on one day and people were just talking in there and they're like, who in here has like started playing World of Warcraft BC or later? And like everybody's like, no, my account was created in 2004, 2005. So a lot of the beta testers and stuff are old hats, people that played class or like vanilla as it originally launched,
Right.
which I think is smart because the
Well,
it's
because you want people who have actually experienced the game in the way that it actually
yeah,
was.
and because the beta test isn't a content test, like you said,
No,
we're,
no, no.
we're we're copying a game, we're not changing things, so they don't need to
Right.
know is Molten Core fun.
Right.
They don't need to know does the talent tree balance feel good. You have
Right.
a literal expansion's worth of data for that. What they need to know is are things working as intended?
Right.
Is this broken? Like is stuff working? One of the big things that like outside of layering, I'd say the second most or equally most controversial thing is their implementation of spell batching,
Yeah.
which I don't know how familiar you are, but
I am. I watched a video once and
my
it really clarified
yeah
some
my,
things
my
for me.
TLDR, as the way I understand it, is basically back in the day, 2004, when World of Warcraft came out, the internet was a baby and sucked,
Yeah.
comparatively, and as a
Right.
result, people with latency had advantages or disadvantages depending on how good your internet was, which would cause issues, especially in PvP. So they implemented a solution in the form of spell batching, where basically spells would be cast and the server would tick on a cadence. And so it would process inputs on set intervals of time so that if I click charge and another warrior clicks charge at the exact same time, but my internet's shit compared to yours, you don't charge me, interrupt me, and prevent me from charging because they'll both happen within that batch window. Latency is then accounted for, and basically we end up charging each other because the spell is processed at the exact same time. The
Right.
internet is better nowadays, so there's not a need for spell batching, but the way that PvP and stuff played out in Classic, if you remove spell batching, a lot of the strategies and tactics would actually change and would give you a potentially different experience. So they
Right.
have artificially reintroduced spell batching
Which is
to
amazing to me.
replicate a vanilla experience so that the play feels the same as it did, even though the reason that it was implemented has effectively been fixed via modern technology in the world and increases in our infrastructure for the internet. The question that has come up with a lot of the streamers, and a lot of them are admittedly biased because they admit to playing on the private servers, where the private servers didn't have Blizzard data, so they either did or did not implement spell batching, and they did it in various ways to replicate what they remember vanilla feeling like. So a lot of the streamers I've said have the feeling that spell batching windows feel too large, but it's difficult to say because you're trying to recall 2004 and be like, yeah, this is the same or this is different. Um, and it's not like YouTube even really like I don't even know if did it exist in 2004 or if it did,
Yeah, it
it
was
was
brand new. It was a baby.
such
It
a
was
small
very,
thing.
very
It like
tiny.
because I
Yeah.
remember I watched a lot of Warcraft videos, but you didn't watch them on YouTube. You watched them on
No.
WarcraftMovies.com.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
like that's where I watched like the world first Ragnaros kill. Like got posted on there. There were a handful of like
Right.
guides and stuff like that. You didn't watch it on YouTube, so the amount of
Right.
coverage, because again, computers were shit 14 years ago. Like, so the ability to play a game and run recording software, you had to have a pretty good computer by that day's standards. So there's not a lot of people that were capturing their gameplay, and streaming was not a thing that didn't exist.
Right.
So there's not a lot of like, oh, we can just go look at the historical data, pull up, Slootbag stream from that day, and
Right.
just
Right.
look at
Right.
his VOD. Like that's not a thing. So again, it's one of those things where we're trying to replicate something as best we can remember. Blizzard's the only one that knows what the hard coded stuff is because they're the ones that own
Right.
the
'Cause they
the
have it.
stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, well, it doesn't feel the same, but we don't know if it doesn't feel the same or if we're just misremembering because at that point in time you accepted latency in the internet because your internet sucked. And so you
Right.
didn't notice the spell batching as much because it basically was just accounting for the latency you had inherently, as where now you've got people with Google Fiber that have like 1 gig up, 1 gig down that don't know what
Right.
latency is, and they're like, oh my god, the spell batching window feels so big. Is it because it's big, or is it because our expectations of video games have changed?
I think that's probably more likely, honestly.
Yeah, I don't
And
know.
I think you bring up some interesting points that are all going to fold into, I think essentially what I think is most interesting and important to think about is the fact that we've got potentially 8.2 in live is coming. I
Yes.
mean, we say potentially, most likely probably the same.
8.2 in the next 2 weeks, very likely.
Yeah, so we'll see that coming, but then 6 weeks later, we've got Classic that's going to open up,
Yep.
and people are going to go for it. I am super curious about, you know, how this goes forward from here. I think right now you've pointed out that there's like a lot of buzz and excitement about it, and I think this is my theories. I have no data, but this is just me spitballing. There's not a lot going on in life. People are looking for something to do.
Yep.
This is the first time we've seen Classic start to really roll out people who are new to the game because I would dare say that there are way more players that never played live that are interested in Classic than there are Classic players who actually played Classic. Do you know what I
Yeah, well,
mean?
like I was gonna say, like I was just thinking. So when you look at live game, right? There's a lot of
Right.
people that have quit WoW because they don't like the decisions that they made, and that's a whole nother discussion whether they were justified. But
Right.
like even there's some people that I know that quit in BC because they simply did not like the introduction of flying.
I
So
think
there
that's
there
pretty wild.
so there are people that loved vanilla that quit at various stages between vanilla and BFA
Warlords.
that quit because the game that they like changed, which is
Right.
completely justified. If the things that you like changed, then go play something else. Like there's nothing wrong with that.
I'm
So
all for it.
so when
Yeah.
you look at the introduction of Classic, I think a significant portion of the people still playing the game are interested in Classic because I think we have a lot of younger players playing World of Warcraft, right? Like
Yeah.
18-year-old, like you throw an 18-year-old right now that's playing
Right.
BFA, right? That's in like a competitive rating guild.
Right.
That would mean that they were 3 when
Right.
Vanilla came out. So the odds of
Exactly.
them playing are effectively 0.
Yeah, slim to none.
So you've got a lot of these young players or whatever that are interested in Classic because they never saw it, and they're hearing all of us old fogies,
Right.
32
Almost the
years
same
old.
like
Like,
releasing a remaster for people to play,
yeah,
or Nintendo, releases a collection of such and such series, and you're like, great, I can go back and revisit that.
yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so you have the
And
30, 40, 50-year-olds that played Vanilla when Vanilla was a thing and want to go back because they remember the good times. But then you also have the
right,
15, 20, 20-year-olds that never played it that are interested. So I think the
right,
player base that's at least going to log in, create a character, and play for, 10, 20 hours is pretty high.
yeah, exactly. So I think that's super interesting that right now there's like super hyper buzz going on. We can see that engagement on Twitch. I think also there's an interesting kind of it's such a limited beta access that
Yeah.
there are a lot of people out there that can only watch Twitch instead of play it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and that's certainly like the I'm not invited
Yeah.
Like that feeling makes people want to play because they're watching these streamers have a blast.
Yeah,
And to
exactly.
be fair, a lot of the streamers that are really popular are guys that played in vanilla and
Yeah,
for instance
sure.
Tips Out, SFan, those
Right.
are dudes that played on private servers and know the
Right.
meta and love that shit. And then you got Asmongold, who while he plays the live game, I think one of his like big things over the last I don't know how many years that he's been big is he continues to play, but he constantly bitches about the changes and talks about how great things were back in the day. So like
That's kind of
he's
his thing.
he's
So
well yeah, I mean he's an
yeah.
entertainer. I don't mean anything
Yeah.
against Asmongold. I think he's good for the
No, no, no,
community. He
no.
brings a lot of
No,
eyes on
absolutely.
there, and when he's
Agreed.
not being a streamer and being goofy and saying stuff, when you have him in a serious conversation, for instance, like when he's on Classic Cast or when he's on any of the other podcasts he does, I think he has an incredibly deep knowledge of the game. He has one of the true, most genuine loves for Warcraft, and I think he's a force for good. But his player base brings with it a lot of people that have like fallen into the things were better back in the day. So like as you look at all this stuff, like you're talking about the hype that's behind it. I think the hype is incredibly real. I think people are very excited for it for various reasons. The question I just pose is, will it last? And is it like how many people? God, you try to make it impossible here to fish, but
No,
like
I'm Patrick Swayze. This is Ghost, baby.
God, but
Oh, my love. Sorry, I got distracted.
no, but it'll be really interesting because I want to know like we were talking about this beforehand. You'll probably get a max level character. You want to enjoy classic for what it is, and it'll fill
Oh
in the
yeah,
gaps when there's
absolutely,
not stuff going on
absolutely.
in live. But you like live as it exists for the most part, and
Yeah, for
you're
the most
enjoying
part.
raid leading and running the guild and whatnot.
Yeah,
Me,
right.
on the other hand, while I love I don't love live, but I enjoy raiding. I like the guild that we've established. I like my parts in it, and I like progressing with our AOTC mentality.
Right.
I want to get into and clear Naxxramas if I can,
Yeah. See,
because
this is where it gets
vanilla,
really interesting.
and for me this is the big thing, is I played vanilla. I
Right.
created my account in 2005, but I was a freshman in college at the Air
Right.
Force Academy and had effectively zero free time. So I never cleared Molten Core. I stepped foot
Right.
in it. I don't even remember how many bosses we killed. Like my biggest experience was Upper Blackrock Spire, the 10-man raid, and
Right.
Zul'Gurub when it came out. Our guild made a big push on that, and I got invited along for that. But I didn't do Nax, I didn't do AQ, I didn't see the gates of AQ, I didn't do like full clears of Molten Core. I wasn't like a rank 14 PvP or anything like that. I did what I could with the time I had. I enjoyed the hell out of the game, and then when Burning Crusade hit and I had a little bit more time because I was deeper into my college career, had freed up some credit time, was no longer a freshman in a military academy.
Right.
Then I started delving into progression rating, trying to make my way into Black Temple and whatnot. So I want to revisit Classic because it's a game that I enjoyed the hell out of, but I
Right.
also it's an opportunity to go back and kind of it's like a round two. It's a rematch. I don't know the best way to put it. It's like I missed out on it when it was a live experience, and it's now a recreated chance where I can go back and do the things that I watched videos and read about and was super hyped and always sad that I didn't have the time to commit to. Now
Right.
I do have those opportunities, and if Classic exists as a long form thing, you're no longer constrained to the 2 year window where all of a sudden BC comes in and no one cares about Nax anymore. Assuming
Right.
the classic is going to exist for the lifespan of World of Warcraft,
I mean, they could
if
do seasons.
if
They
it
could do,
yeah, but
reruns.
I don't think like I doubt that they're going to just straight up delete
No, no,
servers.
no, because that feels bad.
So like if it comes down to it, if it takes me 6 years to get through Nax, I might actually have 6 years to do it on an official Blizzard server, which is
Yeah.
wild and it's great, and I want to do
Provided
that.
it is successful enough to warrant that, and that's where I think it's really interesting because like I personally, I mean, like they feel like completely different. They're not completely different games.
They
Obviously,
are. They are though.
but for all intents and purposes, I feel like BFA, as we talked about last week, and just in general, it feels like a very modern AAA game that wants to get your time. That unfortunately, and this might just be me, where I start to really see design mechanics that are just designed around the hamster wheel. Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just and I think players can see that, and I think players aren't dumb, and I think we're smart enough to know if we're having fun because it's fun or if we're like no. And
Yeah.
especially if you're talking about a game that you're subscribed to and you feel like I should be able to get a moderate, like I think of it like a membership to anything, to a Movie Pass or whatever you subscribe to nowadays. I should get enough enjoyment out of the subscription that I pay, what, 15 a month for 12 months, which
Yeah.
is your math. You tell me.
Well, it's
But
always
like,
kind of a weird thing too when they add new expansions and like classic. Obviously, you say it's not a different game, but I would argue the classic and BFA
yeah,
are entirely different games. But it's a strange
yeah,
thing because like to play BFA, you technically have purchased, even though at a steeply discounted price, all of the previous expansions and have gotten all of
yeah,
the content that came with it.
exactly.
But you can't perform that, and I don't think it's a direct analogy, and maybe it's not fair to think this way. But in my brain, it's like if I got a gym membership or if I got a like Netflix or something like that, and so I find that I really love this movie on Netflix, or there's this piece of equipment at the gym that I really like, but then Netflix rolls out with this new series. And all of a sudden, I can't watch the movie I liked anymore. And I guess
Right.
that happens on Netflix with licensing where stuff disappears, but that's not the same thing. But
Yeah.
in a gym, it's like, I really like this press machine, but look, we got these fancy new leg press over here, and now you
Right.
can't use that anymore, even though it's part of
Or
your
even
gym
it
membership. And
starts
it's like,
being like, it was a pretty much, just kind of base gym. You got your machines and your free weights, and then 15 years later, it's all yoga classes.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, and like the gym exists,
Or
but it's
something.
locked behind a room. They're like, that part of the gym is no longer accessible to you. You can only use the cycling room now.
Sure,
Like
sure.
it's kind of a it's a
interesting
it's a
analogy,
it's a super
but
weird analogy, but at the same time, a lot of people felt that way. They're like, why are private servers a violation of the TOS, and why are people being punished? If you have an active subscription, you're playing the game, but you like a previous version, and I'm still subscribing. Why am I not allowed to go back and enjoy the version of the game? Which brings up the interesting conversation of like, and this is jumping ahead, and we'll get there, but like. To throw it out there, what does it look like past Classic? Are we going to get BC remakes? Are we going to get Wrath remakes? Are we going to get WAD
Wrath.
remakes? Like, how far does it go? What do the players want? Where does it end?
It is not going to go to WAD. I will tell you that.
But there might be some dude out there that fucking loved WAD.
I loved WAD. We can talk about that another time.
But yeah, no.
Efficient talk
But
about
it's
perspective.
so it's
But,
interesting to kind of look at it from that perspective and like with that lens or whatever. So
yeah,
I had a point
this
that I
is-
wanted to make, and I ramble so much I've completely forgotten what I was going to
That's
talk
all
about.
right. Matt Krantz 99. Oh, Matty Krantz 99 has an interesting point that I think we're kind of getting around and dancing around, and I think that it totally folds into this is that ownership of our entertainment is a really kind of odd topic in general. That sense of like ownership, like this is my game, this is my experience, and once it changes, it feels like if someone's like taken something from you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When like I feel like my general attitude in life is just like um my if something changes, it's unfortunate, and I'll miss it, and I might even be upset or angry. But like, I hope I can, and my life have enough of a sense of, you know, I loved such and such a thing or whatever. It was the greatest thing I ever experienced. But hopefully, like for instance, you say what you will about Star Wars. We are not going to get into Star Wars right now, but you know, things I love and things I don't necessarily. There's a lot of discussion to have there, but like I can still really love the experiences I had as a kid watching the prequels or the original trilogy, or if I'm really into The Last Jedi, like, no one has to invalidate that for you.
Well,
So I
that's the
think
crazy thing is everybody experiences life differently and enjoys things differently, and it's always this weird thing where people are trying to tell you you're wrong for enjoying a game. I did not like Warlords, but if there's
right,
somebody out there that wants a Warlords remake, I'm not going to look at them and go, "You're fucking stupid." Like if
right,
they enjoyed it and there was something about the gameplay loop that they liked, then like that's on them. I
right.
don't know if there's enough of a following to justify spending the money for it, but like if there's enough of the people that are interested in it, go for it. Remake WAD. I won't play it, but that doesn't mean you can't.
Dude,
Um,
I will play
but
that thing.
I
till
remember
it's
the point I wanted to make, and prepare yourself for a potentially long diversion
oh,
here.
jeez.
But
All right.
so you were talking, right? You're talking about how
Yeah.
the BFA, how time investment, right? And I think that's the big difference that you're going to find with Classic versus BFA. And this is I'm gonna pull from another podcast that's out there, Classicast, run by SFan TV. He plays Paladins and whatnot. He's been one of the big names in streamers. And I just watched his most recent one, and they had one. I'm terrible because I don't remember his name, but there was a guy on there who was part of the original World of Warcraft design team.
Jeez.
He was responsible for the class design of all of the classes for the game as it existed, and he was a big part of like quest design and whatnot. He was like one of the original four, and then as the things expanded, he started to specialize or whatever. But like he was talking about, so when they designed the game, it was meant to take a long time, and it was meant to be somewhat tedious because the game was about the journey. And while the end game was obviously important and they created a lot of stuff to do there, one of the most important things that they were interested in was the role playing element of an RPG and forcing player interactions. And like one of the points that he made is, yeah, it's cool and you'll remember potentially, that cool time that you got your first Ragnaros kill and stuff. But when you look at like the big stuff, like how many times like could you name the guild that got the first rag kill like in the video that
I
came out
couldn't.
associated
No
with
way.
it? I don't remember who it was, but do you remember Leroy Jenkins?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was vanilla. That came out. That was Upper Blackrock Spire or whatever, and that was just a goofy thing. Granted, it was staged, but at the time, people thought it was just a bad group doing crazy stuff. And people remember it because it was about player interaction. It was people having fun and doing stuff. And it's a fundamental difference because World of Warcraft became profoundly interesting and, like, I think captivated and captured an audience because people were spending huge amounts of time in the game living in Azeroth. You were doing all of your stuff in Azeroth. Your social circle existed in Azeroth. Your server identity and all that stuff was around your character. And because it was such a pain in the ass to have alts, I wasn't just John playing in the guild Stormforged. I had a tune. I was Kazjan. I was the Warlock. I was a member of whatever guild on whatever server, and I had my part to fill within the raid, but I also would do my five mans and my professions, and I would explore and interact and do my stuff in the world, and that's my identity. And because it required a large amount of time, the people, like if you were doing high end stuff, those other people put in similar time commitments, and so you built friendships and developed communities around the game. BFA
Right.
as it exists now is appealing to a lot of people because it doesn't require that. Like we were talking about, I think last time we did our show or whatever, how you like the fact that you can log in on Tuesday, you can do your island expeditions in the morning, you can show up to raid, you can do your raid, and then you can do a Mythic Plus afterwards, and you're not obligated to come back into the game, which is great for a busy
Yeah.
person that wants to experience
Yeah.
everything the WoW has to have.
Right.
The
You
the
can do it
modern
on
game is
due
much more
date.
catering. You do that in Classic, you will not be raiding. It's a
Right.
different game that has different restraints on your lives, and if you don't want to
Exactly.
make WoW a priority, then you're not going to see end game content, and that's okay. There are
Yeah.
some
But
people in
here's the
Classic that
thing.
loved just fishing, and they came in and they do what we're doing right now, and they just had fishing and they
Exactly.
had fun. The game can be what you want it to be, but if you want
Yeah.
to know life the shit out of BFA, and I did some introspection, I think is the right word, looking at myself and identifying like what is it that I like about the modern game and why is my gameplay habits the way it is. I'm a huge mount collector. I have
Yeah.
468 mounts or something like that.
Yep. You're a bit of
The
a mount whore.
the only reason I have those though is I think for me a game that is fulfilling and rewarding is a game that I can put my all into and I can continuously get stuff back. I did not have a lot of mounts in Classic because that wasn't a thing that was reasonable to do, but the game itself provided enough of a gameplay loop that literally any free time I had, I could log in and there was something I could do. In
So
live, I don't log
yeah.
in anymore because unless I'm going to go back and farm old content, right now, it's not worth my time because there's nothing worth doing. I've
Yeah, but
maxed out my neck,
don't
I've
you feel
maxed out
like
my
you've
gear.
already farmed that content as well? I mean, like at this point,
Well,
like if
and
you've been playing long enough, you've kind of
Well, and that's just the thing is I'm still going back and I'm trying to get mounts that have low drop rates from Burning Crusade. It's the same mount I've been trying to get for 13 years. Like
exactly.
or the Baron Rivendare mount from
You'll
vanilla
get it in
that
classic.
I
You'll get it in
still Oh yeah,
classic.
I hope so. But like it's a mount that I still don't have to this day. Like
I've seen it
when
drop 4 times. You
seriously,
know that?
I've never
Yeah,
seen it
four
drop
times.
once.
Four
Never.
times. Been in
But
4 groups.
Jesus. But
I know.
like for what it's worth, like yeah, like yes, there's replayability on retail because you technically have access to some of the old stuff. But
Yeah.
15
And
years,
sometimes you get into that, but
15
yeah,
years
you're
of doing
talking about
Strathholm runs, like that's a little
right,
bit much to
right.
tell me that I should be excited about logging in and going to Strathholm today.
Okay.
Like that
Yeah,
is absolutely
exactly.
a chore. But like I create that for myself. Like if there was more to do in live, I probably wouldn't give a shit about mounts because I'd be doing the other stuff. The only reason
Yeah.
I have so many achievement points and have so many mounts is the game has gone to a point where time management, like I guess if I joined a mythic raiding guild where you
Right.
literally had to raid, 6 days a week and the rest of
Right.
the time you were spent farming mats to make flasks so that you had your flasks and pots, then maybe I wouldn't be a mount whore, but like I don't know, like
But
raiding is fun and
suffice
stuff,
you
but
could
like
put your time into. I'm a Mog guy, I
yeah.
go look for hot Mogs.
But like,
But
yeah, our circle of friends, we're not a mythic raiding guild. I don't really want to leave behind Stormforge to go seek out time sinks. Like, I just prefer
Exactly.
that the game gave me more to do. And we'll see. This is a classic
Yeah.
debate here, but we'll see with
But
8.2. Theoretically, we're gonna get some more of that when we go into Nomer, not
yeah,
Nomergon, fucking Gnome Land
yeah.
and Najatar or whatever. So
Mechagon, got it.
Mechagon, yeah,
Phew.
yeah,
So here's the thing, kind of jumping off some of the things that you just ran into here. So I'm not gonna probably play WoW with any like magnificent or classic with any like magnificent, intention to get to Molten Core. I'll probably get there at some point. I bet I will play a fair amount, and it also kind of depends on what's going on in live. I'm also busy for the next few
yeah. I mean, you're
months.
you're married, you're running shows, you're a
Yeah,
functional member of society. I'm a
right.
degenerate single bachelor that just wastes my time playing video
But
games. So,
that's why we get along
well,
so
and we have
well.
different approaches, and like that's
Yeah,
okay. Classic
absolutely.
offers something
Yeah,
to both of us, as where BFA
exactly.
doesn't.
But at the same time, I have to be like straight up honest. I started in Lich King, and Lich King I think still, had or even in like here's literally the first thing I did when I logged in on a trial. I rolled a dwarf. I ran up to Ironforge, and I knew all I wanted to do was go see the night elves. Of course, it never occurred to me that I should just roll a night elf because in my mind, I'm like, I'm a dwarf. I want to be a dwarf. Actually, I wasn't a dwarf. I was a human paladin. His name was Atrell, as you know. That was the first tune I made.
We're not talking Davlamine right now.
No, no, no. This was Atrell on Misha, and then I re-rolled once I actually subbed onto my F. But nevertheless, um, so first thing I did was get this human. I found the tram. I got to Ironforge and was like, "This is amazing. How do I get to the Night Elves? I want to go
I
see
love
them."
Ironforge as far as the
Dude,
Alliance
I
City.
did too.
I think you like
I
Stormwind
love it.
more, but I think Ironforge of the Alliance cities is the best.
Ironforge
It's so good.
is so great. I do love Stormforge, but it's a really, really good city. Anyway, so I'm there, and like the first thing I want to do, like this is a testament to me of just kind of the magic of a gigantic world that felt like, and this is granted a totally different era in which games existed and how they were, sold to us and what they were accomplishing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They're not trying to rip something out of us, but nevertheless I get there and I ask the level 70 on this trial account, how do I get to um freaking whatever it's called,
Darnassus.
Darnassus. And he walked me through it. I
Run up to
whispered, and the
Menethil
dude,
Harbor, get on the fucking
yes,
boat, take the
yes,
boat
just
up
run,
to Dark
yes,
Shore, get on the boat from Dark Shore over
yes,
to
yes,
Darnassus, and then take the portal up
yes,
to the city. I did that
yes.
the other day on my mage.
Yes, 10 days of my trial, and I probably spent 2 days of that trial just like working on that. You know what I mean?
But that's an
And
accomplishment. The world feels big,
yes,
and you're
I
excited to get there. Like,
love, and that's what's really funny is because we've been doing classic, and I jumped on the first time was, we were in a group of 5 or whatever, and that is super fun because you actually it matters like it's not so fast when you're in a group of 5 because you're still looting and you're still doing things, but it's really cool to run around and feel like we're all actually partied up for a reason. Like you and
well,
Vandy
and
could
the
have
world
partied up
feels
in
dangerous again.
BFA, but like, yeah, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of things. So what I'm saying is that like, yes, I didn't play it, or I'm probably not gonna, be as into it. I won't have the time, but at the very least, like, I really enjoy jumping in classic and just killing things and leveling and MMOing. I mean, just like classic walking around, taking your time, talking to people. Because we're not all rushing around, you end up goofing around a lot with just random other players. There's just a lot of life in the game that. And I'm talking completely from the perspective of I know I'm not going to play this game as probably very much, but I probably will play it. I'll get to level 60. I'll get there. I just, there's something about it, and I think it's the kind of just the I don't know if it's the intention. I never feel like classic is trying to get me to waste or not waste time. It's never trying
Yeah,
to
I
like
think the
it's
tinfoil hat people that are like, "Oh my God, BFA, they're creating time loops by getting rid of stuff to just up your time plate." I don't think that's accurate.
I don't think that's accurate, but I
But
do I do feel like there are some designs around the idea of like how do we get things for people to do?
well,
You
and
know
the,
what I
the
mean?
reality is, and so this is the funny thing, right? So the
Yeah.
reason that like you look at BFA and we talk about how you can log in for what
Yeah.
maybe 6 hours a week on a single day and you can
Right.
accomplish everything you need to stay competitive for an AOTC
Right.
rating, as we can't
Exactly.
do that on Classic. But why did we get there? And I think the reality is people don't know what they want, right? And we don't understand where our fun comes from
Yeah.
because
Right.
why did they add flying in Burning Crusade? Because people complained about how
People
long
wanted
it
it.
took to travel around, and so the populace is like, we want a better way. Why did they add more graveyards? Why did they increase the flight speed from Griffin Masters? Why did they put more flight points? Why did they add portals? Why did they boost the Zeppelin speed? Why did all these conveniences
Yeah.
come into the game that we now bitch about, like, oh my god, Classic is so good because it made the world feel big? Well, all the changes that made the world feel smaller is because people were like, "Oh my god, I don't want to jump on a flight path and AFK for 15 minutes." But when you like, it makes sense, like at the time. But then
Yeah.
you make these slow cuts, these slow cuts, these slow cuts towards convenience, and you get to a game where you can play 4 or 6 hours a week
Yeah.
and do effectively everything, which
Right.
for some people is great. But
Yeah.
for
I
other
mean,
people
it's
that are
it's
looking to
too
live in a
convenient,
world
right?
and for the
That's
world
all.
to feel
Yeah.
big and for everything to feel alive, like it's one of those things where you have to ask yourself, do you want any given sub to be able to
Right.
experience everything the game has to offer? If the answer
Yeah.
is yes, Classic cannot exist because the
Right.
way the Classic was designed, every single sub cannot and will not clear Nax.
Yeah. Exactly.
I put in a lot of time in Classic and I never cleared Molten Core.
I
Like
spent,
like
dude, I played an exorbitant amount. This isn't classic, but I'm just saying, like, of just a game that was slow. I played an exorbitant amount of Lich King. I
well, I
did
mean,
not hit I did not hit a max level tune until Pandaria.
I
That's
think
what I'm saying.
Cataclysm is when they redesigned the world, they redid a lot of the low level quests, and I think it shook up the speed at which you were able to level. And then the Cataclysm was the first hit. Then it got a little more expeditious in Panda, and then when we hit
Yeah.
WAD, it was incredibly efficient to level. And so
And
things had
I don't think
changed
yeah,
time to
yeah.
time.
And I don't think that's been necessarily like a malicious, changes to
No, it
try.
came at
I
the
think
it came at the behest of the players. The players
of the
asked for it.
players and how the landscape is just changing. I mean, across gaming and
Yeah.
players, and now I think we're especially in a place where it has never been like harder and better to be like somebody who plays video games because everyone wants to get you to play a game,
Well, and
and be
honestly,
involved in it.
the best thing that can happen is Classic to be a big hit and BFA to continue and get good because then if you're somebody that has a huge amount of time to sink, like I envision a world where I log in for my 6 hours a week, stay current and live, and then the rest of the time that I would be just like running like laps around Zara lore or just like trying to find
Let's go to
something to do
town.
with world questing, instead of
Yeah,
wasting my time staring at an auction house, I'll just play Classic because
yeah,
there's
exactly.
always something to do in Classic.
Yeah.
Like,
So that's where I'm kind of interested now is, I mean, looking at the future, obviously there are some things that I personally think are really, really, really fun about Classic, and I think it's literally just it's slow, it's grindy. We spend a lot more time talking. I mean, you want to group up with people. Like Kaz, you leveled from what 110 to 120 by yourself because you don't need to be with anybody.
no, it slows you
You
down in a
can
lot of
go
cases.
faster. Exactly. So
Because
you
I had
just
played the PTR or the beta for BFA, so I didn't read
right.
any of the quest texts. I didn't bother
Yeah,
to
you
do.
just like
I
went
knew
for
where
it.
everything is because I leveled 3 tunes, I think,
Right.
in the beta. And so when it hit, like I wanted to get max level as soon as I could because leveling in the modern game is not the interesting
Yeah.
part.
They
World of
know that.
Warcraft and
Yeah.
BFA exists in the end game exclusively, as were Classic. There was a lot to do in the end game. However, the leveling
Yeah.
process was a significant portion of the gameplay, and there was a lot of stuff to be explored and experienced during that time.
Yeah.
Which brings me to a point that I would like if we want to like again we don't have an outline, so I'm just gonna just pivot randomly and just start
Yeah.
talking here. But like
That's fine, I think.
what you had mentioned before was you're talking about what made or what captivated people in the classic era, what made people interested and excited to play classic, and what were the things that were great. And one of the things that I think that is I didn't realize was missing until I started playing the beta, but now more than ever I wish is the role playing element of an MMORPG. So like when you play a rogue on live on VFA right now, you just vanish. You can do whatever. You can pick locks. You can do all that stuff, which admittedly have the rogue class fantasy.
Sure.
But when I logged on, I was doing my Altric Valley on these because this the server we're on right now. If you're coming
Right.
back at
It's
some weird
just
point in time, it is an AV only server where we can only exist in AV or in
that's why we're on
Orgrimmar.
random 58s right now.
Yeah, but you get a pre-made tune with a bunch of stuff, and then I looked in there because I didn't play Rogue in Classic, and I looked in my bag, and they gave me Thieves Tools, and I was like, Thieves Tools? I was like, I knew that there was reagents, I knew there was a lot of stuff you had to do, but I was like, what is this for? Well, in order to pick a lock, you had to have on your person thieves' tools,
It's like
which
I
I
gotta
was
put
just
some
like,
holy candles and
yeah,
stuff in here.
it's an RPG, and you create a role playing element that adds to the class fantasy. Yeah, it takes up a bag space. Yeah, it's inconvenient, but you're doing something that literally no one else can do, and there comes a
Yeah,
cost with it. Like it's not like in real life, like other than maybe in Divinity where they're like, oh, you can use your bone to pick locks, which is a little weird, but I guess if you're undead, it makes sense kind of. But like if I was gonna try to if I was gonna go out and LARP as a rogue and I was gonna try to lockpick something, I'm not gonna use a rock to pick a lock. Like that shit doesn't make sense. You have to have the tools for it.
yeah, right.
And like you're talking about like questing and stuff like that, and enjoying the experience and how I could speed level through in the modern game. Well, surprise, surprise, when you log into Classic, you accept a quest. If you don't read the quest text, good luck doing that quest because there
No
are
joke.
no markers on the world. When you
Yeah,
mouse over something out there, it doesn't tell you that it drops a particular item. There's not a
and
big thing highlighted on
yeah,
your map. Like, like that
and
was
even some of the quest design, you get a quest somewhere that's across the zone and not with anything
yeah.
else. You know,
Go kill the
which
harpies to the north of here.
you're like,
What the
where's
fuck
that?
does that mean?
Yeah,
I'm in the
exactly.
middle of the Barrens. The north of here is a lot of land. So you create those, and so like you were forced to read the quest text in order to
Right.
complete quests. And I think whether people like it or not, that forced lore on you because you're now reading stuff and you understand the world that you're part of. Why am I going and killing these harpies? Oh, well, they
Yeah.
ambushed some of our trade caravans that were making their way up into Ashenvale or whatever. So we're going to go try to get back some of the loot and we're going to take out their leader to try to quell their numbers. As we're on live, you get one of the things that automatically skips the text, it highlights on your map. You fly over there, you kill X number of things, you fly back, you get your experience, and you move on. And you don't know why you were there. All you know is that it gave you 30,000 experience and you got a quarter of a bar's worth of XP as you work your way towards your next level. So like
Right. Exactly.
indirectly it forces the role playing element because you're forced to actually engage with the
Engage with
world.
the
And
story.
as a
Yeah.
result like you start to care about the things that are about you. I think you'll find a lot of people that played vanilla BC Wrath before they started introducing a lot of these. And yeah, there was Questy and there were various map add-ons and stuff that gave you
Sure.
stuff.
Sure.
But like
Sure.
you'll find a lot of those players I think are more interested in the lore and more deeply rooted in the game itself because they were more connected to it. If you find somebody that started playing in WoD, started playing in Legion, like many of them, like Doc is the one that comes to mind. Like he was a top tier priest, but you ask him anything about the world that he played in, and the most that he knew about was from Hearthstone cards that he memorized because he was playing that. He didn't know anything
Dude,
about the
that guy
game
does
lore
not read a
wise
thing. Yeah.
because he didn't read any of the quests because he
Oh,
didn't
I
feel
miss
a need
Doc.
to. Like he didn't care
Yeah.
about it. So like it's a different
Right.
generation of gamers, but it creates a different gameplay loop. And I think the reason people look so nostalgically back is because they felt connected to the world in a way that the modern game doesn't support or encourage.
I could buy that. I could buy that as a reason for sure. I think the game, either by design or just be, you know, intelligent design or by accident. It's just it's slower. It takes time. You get to know areas. You spend time with people, and so I think there's some things to really be. I wouldn't say necessarily like commended. I mean, they're just natural parts of the game that I think are interesting to a certain type of gamer. Again,
Yeah.
I don't think everyone's gonna like this,
No,
to be honest. I mean,
there's gonna be, I would say, potentially not even exaggerating, a million plus players that are
yeah,
going to create a character that never played, that are excited to check out a classic, and before they hit level 10, they're going to go, fuck this game, and they're never going to play
exactly.
again.
Yeah, and I'm really interested, and I think it's fascinating. I mean, just thinking how the future is going to go. I think you'll also have not as many players, but you might have some players that start playing it and love it. You know what I mean?
Oh,
And
yeah.
go, this is great. I didn't realize.
I mean, it's already
Um,
happened. Venruki didn't play Classic, but he got a beta key because he's involved with Blizzard. He's a BlizzCon champ and he's a streamer. And so for
yeah,
the first time ever, he played it, and he's like, "This is the most fun I've had in WoW, and I don't know how long." Like the proof is already out there that there's people that are gonna come in that have never played
yeah,
before and are going to
they're
fall in
gonna
love. Like,
enjoy it. Yeah. So that's kind of I think the question of we're looking at the future. There's a couple of things that I'm interested in seeing how they come about. And the first is I think we've kind of talked about it. I think people will like it. I think a lot of people will start with it. I think people will fall away and will start to equalize. I wonder where that number ends and how long does it live there through a patch. Like once we get through all of the rollouts and we
yeah,
get through phase 6 or whatever, do we start dying off? I'm really interested to know kind of like does classic um have enough people to be able to keep
Ultimately,
playing it for a long time. I
ultimately
don't know.
though, like from the classic cast that I was watching with SFan and stuff, the reality is like, and they were saying, and I agree with them fully. If you can get enough people that are interested to support a single PvP and a single PvE server with a high population, even if that means that you have to combine servers down the line, which is not ideal, but it
Yeah,
is an
but let it
option.
live. Let it
If
live.
you can create one self-sustaining populace on one server, then the game is a success
Yeah, because I don't
because
think
you're
it's
now giving players, and I'm guessing the people like financially, I suppose, if you have one server's worth of people that weren't subbed to the game before that are now paying a monthly subscription fee for years to come, then you're probably going to end up profiting long term from it.
yeah,
Like,
it probably doesn't cost as much to maintain it. They don't have to develop new content.
no,
They
I,
know
I,
what
I
they're
don't know.
doing.
I'm curious. I'm actually curious. How big is the classic team? I wonder how many people they have working,
Yeah,
like
yeah, I
to
wonder that too.
redevelop the game. Because
I wonder
what
that.
what is their money sink to bring this game to the populace? Because if it's only like a 30-man team that is just going through and like parsing through or whatever, like that's
Right.
not a huge financial like sinkhole. And like the money that they've already made on their classic like launch with the little statue and all that stuff that sold out within an hour of them announcing it,
I think
like
Period tried to get it, did
yeah,
not work.
like literally may have paid off like all of the dev costs. Like I don't
Yep.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and the money they're making through like Twitch sponsorships, the hype that they're building for their game, like there's no way that developing Classic is going to lose them money in my mind. Like
No. No,
like
I
I
don't think
can't
so.
imagine a world where this was a poor financial
Yeah.
decision. But
I'm also, I want to give credit to where credit's due because it feels, I mean, we've talked about in the last year, it's been a rough time for AAA gamers. It's been
yeah,
a rough time to feel like you're a gamer that nobody is actually caring about, no one's listening to. And again, I'm come from a more probably conservative mindset of, dude, it's their game.
it's their IP. They're allowed to do with it what
Exactly.
they will.
They're
But
do what they want. But also, I'm of the mind where it's like, you're making it for people, and it's always nice to have, to feel like somebody is trying to legitimately understand what it's like to be a
yeah,
player in your worlds and in your IPs and in your business models. I think that's the important thing is to
well,
feel like, what does it feel like to be a guy who's playing Battle for Azeroth and the first mount that he's been excited about is freaking locked behind $25 in the store. Do you know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah. Well, and I like Blizzard. I don't know, like if they directly have ever admitted that they were wrong about their take on Classic, but the fact that they're developing a game that J.
I
Allen
think it's
Brack
admission.
came out on
Yeah.
stage and said, "You think you do, but you don't," and said they won't make the game. The fact they're making it is in
Right.
a way an admission of their
Right.
misunderstanding. So their willingness to take that step, I appreciate.
Yeah.
In the same way that like when Dana White brought females into the UFC, like for the longest
Right.
time he's like women will never fight in the UFC, and then like Ronda Rousey came out and revolutionized the fighting sport with like her win streak and stuff like that. She's
Right.
now, you can talk about her career all you want, but like I can always appreciate when someone like makes a definitive statement, looks at the data, and then goes, you know what, I was wrong.
I'm
Let's give it
wrong.
a chance,
Yeah.
and then they end up
Exactly.
like everyone wins from it. Like I hate people that are like, I said no, so I will literally never like support this because I'm not willing to go back on my word. So I'm thankful that
Exactly.
Blizzard had the clarity of mind and the willingness to kind
To
of
trend.
suck it up
Yeah.
and be like,
Yeah.
you know what?
I think it
Let's
could be cool.
announce it. Let's try it, and let's see what happens in the
Yeah.
community. I mean, they've made a lot of people happy. Like,
Right. Right. Um. Nevertheless, the the other thing that I'm really interested in moving forward is that obviously we have a guild in live that we like progressing with. We have 8.2 dropping and a new raid that's dropping,
yes, sir.
and we're going to be jumping into that. And then Classic's going to also launch. And so I'm really, really wondering if they have plans. I can't remember what they've actually said about it. If they have plans to try to kind of sync or desync, as it were, kind of when content comes about, if they're going to try to help one kind of uh, complement the other. And I think the good news is it's like, it's not necessarily like they're not going to lose subscriptions to one or the other because you
No.
need the same subscription to get both, which is more game for everyone to play if they want. But
Best world, yeah, is that the big content patches are staggered in a way that there's always something to do, but they never compete.
yeah,
My concern is, I think 8.2 is a big patch and needed to be because the
Yeah.
live game needs a lot of fixes.
So there's
I
a lot to
think
do in it.
they
Yeah.
anticipated that 8.2 would have been out already, and the
Yeah.
classic team had a date in mind and like talked to the team and said, if we launch this date, will it overlap? And they're like, nope. And so the classic team was confident in saying, we will launch the game on this date. They released the news, expecting 8.2 announcements to take place in turn. And I think 8.2 has come along slower than
Taking a
anticipated
couple weeks.
because
Yeah.
let's say that it ends up now at this point, like the tinfoil hat comes out, but Blizzard loves to launch big stuff like to coincide with competitors' launches. So
Yeah,
Final
makes sense.
Fantasy has a game coming out on the 2nd of July, right?
Oh, let's go
Um,
play that.
So let's say that we happen to get 8.2 on the 2nd of July. 2 weeks later is when the raid launches, so now we're looking at the 16th of July.
Yeah.
So that gives us what? 5 weeks? 6
Pretty
weeks?
much. Mine, it's
Before-
like what, eight bosses? 9 bosses? What is it?
Before Classic comes out, which I mean, the world first race will clearly be over by then because I have no idea the difficulty, but if this is on par or is like one of the harder ones, maybe it takes, into
Yeah,
the
2
second week. So it
levels.
takes 2 weeks to clear for the best guilds in the world. Method gets their kill 15 days in or whatever. Well, now the rest of the world, if you've got competitive Mythic Raiders that want to experience Classic, they've got like 3 weeks before another gigantic time sink comes out.
Right.
and
And
I-
maybe not all
there's-
those people will be playing Classic. Maybe some people are getting ready to just
Yeah,
like
so-
jump
yeah.
ship and
Do people not care? Do people just expect Classic to exist for as long as it needs to exist? And so, yeah, they're going to be behind the rest of the world, but you don't need to be there on launch because, like, you're
what
not
is
going
phase
to.
2 is Molten Core, right?
I don't remember. I found the
Okay.
thing once. Let me
But
s-
it's not like you got to get to max to like.
No, but I mean, it's not like Nax is going to be cleared in a week. I mean, like,
Right.
it's going to take you, let's see. So, phase 1. Now, phase 1, Molten Core, Nexia, and Maradon. Phase 2
Oh,
is
that's phase
Diarmall, and then 2 of the world bosses. But
Cool.
just because it's phase 1 doesn't mean that it's available on launch.
Right.
It could be part of the patch cycle, and then it comes out
Right.
during whatever. I don't know how they're going to work that. But either way, like, I'm sure there's going to be a race to world first Molten Core, which is likely going to be won by one of the private server guilds because they have experience and understanding, and they've got everything already planned out. But I mean, it's possible. Like if the servers are going to be up and not be wiped and aren't going to fail or whatever, it could take you a year to get through Molten Core, and that's just fine because you actually have the luxury of time this time around. So
Right.
maybe some guilds are like, no, we'll cutting edge, and then we'll fill in where necessary. I'm just curious to see, will guilds lose players to Classic?
Yeah, I'm
Will-
as running a guild, we're thinking about that. I think what's gonna happen. What are
I'm
you
thinking,
gonna do?
will I lose myself to Classic as
I know,
as the
right?
as the admin officer, the guy that runs a lot of stuff, assistant raid lead, blah 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 blah. I'm gonna tell you right now, if I end up joining a Classic guild, it's gonna be real tough to say no
Classic's
if I
gonna
get
tear
in.
families apart.
If
I'm
I get
saying.
invited into a Molten Core run and it coincides with one of our raid nights, I'm gonna have a serious conversation and really sit down and think about where I'm gonna raid, because if 8.2 fails to live up to what it needs to be, I'm no like I've played live and I've raided through because I believe that Warcraft can be an incredibly good game, and the parts of it that are fun I enjoy. But
Yeah.
now that you're providing me an alternative that is still Warcraft, I am now going to play whatever is more fun instead of the only option. So if Classic is better than live, don't expect to see me on live.
Yep.
Which puts pressure on the live team, which is good potentially, because maybe the Classic fever and the stress of there being a second version of WoW will spurn some creative minds, will force some creative decision making, will potentially open up some conversations that people were hesitant to have, which will lead to a long-term improvement in the quality of life or the
Right.
gaming experience of the retail
for
game.
live. Yeah. The thing is I'm also a little worried, as it were, or not worried, but just kind of concerned just to see like there's not going to be competition amongst like subscription numbers because you need one to do the other.
Yeah, it's
But-
one sub that's going to be reported. So financially, as
But-
long as people are
but-
playing one of the games,
Right, they're
Activision
gonna be
doesn't
fine.
care. But
Right.
like,
But like it's gonna get weird, I think, probably
Well, and
socially for
if-
guilds and for people and friends, and I think it's gonna get weird.
If there are 8 million people subbed to World of Warcraft and 6
Yeah,
million of them are playing Classic,
yeah,
will Blizzard continue to put the resources into developing and expanding the live game as if all 8 million players were playing the live game?
that's the
Or will
question.
they be exploring and putting resources into Classic Plus content, BC remasters,
Right, right,
additional like seasonal stuff within the Classic community? Like
right.
it's
Do we
one of those.
legitimately hit 9.0 and then just start going back to the beginning again?
Yeah,
Like,
it's a very interesting and potentially troubling or potentially awesome. Like
right.
like again, I keep going back to Classic Cast, but because you had one of the original devs, he had a lot of interesting things. I think I was talking about this with Yorick, but the dude, he said there's three outcomes that he foresees or sees as possible outcomes that he would be satisfied with.
Hmm.
One, Classic is a huge hit, and following along the lines of the OG RuneScape guys, Blizzard decides to make additional Classic Plus content, which means we don't set foot into Burning Crusade. We get to Naxxramas, and then some of the original design ideas, i.e., a Karazhan raid in Classic, some additional stuff in like the unexplored zones of the map, Hyjal.
Right,
There were things that got axed from Vanilla in
right.
favor of pushing into a full blown
Dragon Isles
expansion
and
with
stuff.
Burning Crusade. Would we go back to those old thoughts and potentially produce some new stuff there? It would be interesting. He did
That's
mention, though, that people
interesting.
talked about how Karazhan had 3 builds and only one of them made it to live in Burning Crusade. And so Tips was like, I think it would be great if we saw Classic Plus where one of the other ones came forward. And he goes, I caution you. You go back and you get a DVD version of a movie or whatever, and you watch the director's cut where they have the blooper reels with
Saw
deleted
that was
scenes.
good.
The deleted
Yeah,
scenes are often deleted for a reason, and so the
exactly.
fact that there were other versions that didn't make it to live may be because they were just flat out bad. So that's a dangerous line to walk, and will it end up corrupting the game that people love, or is it best to leave Classic untouched? That's an entirely like singular debate in and of itself.
Yes.
Another outcome that he saw that could be acceptable as we progress into, like we've already mentioned to several times, Burning Crusade, Wrath of the
Right.
Lich King, Cataclysm, create additional servers. But now we're talking about maintaining and potentially re-releasing cycled server cycles for a bunch of different games, and that is a huge infrastructure demand when we're
Not
talking
to
about
mention kind of
live
cannibal
servers.
on the number of players who will play World of Warcraft in any form.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah,
I'm
and you start pulling
worried
the
about.
player base in too many directions, and like somebody was talking about, it was either Hazel or Bellular or Taliesin or somebody was talking about like the next WoW killer, and they foresee that the only thing that could kill WoW is potentially WoW. Um,
Yeah,
where like you
yeah,
start creating too many different versions of WoW, and now players don't know where to be, and the communities become so small, and it's hard to actually spend money appropriately, and as a result, everything suffers. So
yeah.
it
That's what
it
I'm
could lead
sort of
to
worried
great
about.
stuff, or it could be horrifying.
Right.
Um, and then the third option, which is probably the best option, is the design team for retail looks at the enthusiasm for Classic and says, we need a think tank. And they sit down and they take a look. Why do people love Classic? What have we changed
Right.
that has
Super
lost us
successful.
players? And how do we make retail the best version of WoW it can be? Because, like, as much as I am excited to go back and clear content that I never had an opportunity to do while it was live, the best possible alternative is that you give me a game with a raid that I've never seen, with a story that I don't know about, that fills all of those notes, gives me all of that satisfaction, but is a new thing, and I don't have to rely on a remake of a game to get that satisfaction, but instead you give me live content where I develop the character I've been playing for 15 years and go in and actually enjoy the journey, enjoy the process, like buy into the storyline. And that sounds harsh, I guess, to retail as it exists because that implies that I'm not getting that experience. And I think that's got to be a tough thing to be a part of the WoW design team right now,
I just feel
where
like everyone's like, "Wow,
where
you guys suck."
yeah, the most positive stuff being said about your brand is people talking about a team that existed before you and criticizing the decisions that have been made leading to the game as it exists. Like, that's got to feel shitty when people are more hyped about undoing the changes you consciously made. But
Right.
it's one of those come to earth, like speak with Jesus moments or whatever, where I think Blizzard kind of needs a slap in the face and their design team needs to wake the fuck up because everything is not all right in BFA.
Yeah.
And there needs to be some changes, and hopefully the best world is we get classic, we get to experience that, we get to fill those nostalgic notes, but
Right.
retail comes out with 8.3, 9.0, 9.1, and they go, we know what we did wrong, we see what it is you like, and let's go back to a game that you enjoy. And people just get hyped out of their fucking skulls, and we get like a better res, better performing, better version with all
Right.
new shit to explore that makes us as excited or more excited for the live game um, than classic.
I get the sense that they kind of have an understanding that, BFA is not in the perfect state right now, and I'm excited to see 8.2. And I think, people look at Classic and want to compare it to WoW to Live, and I think it's probably in some cases out of interest and some out of hope of going like, I like Live. I like that we get new content, and I'd like for the game to continue, and I'd like for it to have players that are excited and people who are not having the best time in
Well,
game right now.
that's just it
Or,
too. Is a lot
you
of the
know,
criticism and stuff that's coming from the big content creators. Like when you listen to a Bellular video, you watch Talienis and Evitel, you listen to Sloot stream. A lot of the criticism they provide isn't because they hate WoW. They're making a living off of the game and they play it because they love it. We just want the
right,
best version that we can possibly get. We want a game that
right.
captivates our imagination, gives us that feeling of player agency, lets us live in a world and live out the fantasy that we want. Um,
I
while
just
while
feel
still
like,
being challenging and nuanced and providing
yeah,
a community and all that stuff, and that it's a lot to ask. Like it's a
right,
potentially impossible task, but I can't help but think they could do things better, and hopefully Classic will provide some insight into player psyche and remind them what it is that got them to where they're at, and perhaps they can learn from their history and rectify some of the mistakes that have been made.
right,
And again, the players aren't immune to the criticism. A lot of the
right.
changes
No,
came at the request of the players who didn't
right.
understand, what all it
What
entailed.
the long-term effect, yeah, would have on something like this, and it's one thing, it's in some ways probably death by a thousand cuts too,
Yeah,
where it's like,
yeah.
sure they could have
Did
done
adding
flying
more
and
graveyards ruin the game? No.
right.
Did adding more flight paths ruin the game? No.
No,
Did
yeah,
increasing the flight speed ruin the game? No. Did
no,
adding portals ruin the game? No.
no,
Did increasing the level experience ruin the game, like the speed? No. Did
right.
class tuning ruin the game? No. But when you collectively make all of these changes, then
You start getting you're
you're
like,
you're
okay, well, what
slowly
are we working
losing
with
the
here?
essence of what you had. And yeah, next thing
Right.
you don't even recognize the game you're playing anymore. The only thing that's
So
the same is like the name.
yeah, yeah, I do want to go on record saying I don't think that Live should look to go back. I think nostalgia is a dangerous idea. I think it's a great thing. I think nostalgia is not a bad thing. I don't think it's inherently a bad thing. I think we can have fond memories of experiences that we had playing World of Warcraft. I will always remember that like freaking, level 70 warrior in that amazing armor. I didn't even know what it was called then, who talked to me and let me know. I'll always remember these amazing things. But I think it's important in my perspective that we're not looking to like recapture magic exactly what it was. You know what I mean? Like we
Yeah,
can never go back to exactly what something was. Even classic, as close and amazing as they've done as far as classic is classic, aside from the small like UI changes, aside from the small quality of life changes, the fact of the matter is this is 15 years later after the game came out. It is a different time. We are different people. Like the socio-economic political landscape of the world, everything goes into kind of how we read this game.
yeah,
So I think people want to be sometimes they're like, I just want this. I want classic. I want it exactly the way it was. And I think that can be a dangerous idea if you're talking about live, just roll back all these changes and stuff because it is a different, time and era and stuff. However, I don't think that means there aren't lessons to be learned. I think the most important one is that for me at least, I never feel like classic is trying to get something out of me. Do you know what I mean?
yeah. Well, and I would say like if I could make one plea from the time that I played, like with
Yeah,
the
our
time I
final
spent with
pleas
beta,
here.
and I was like if they came to me and they're like, why the fuck do you love classic? This game's old, it's outdated. Why are you having so much fun? And what can we implement? I would say let's bring back the role playing element because I
Yeah.
think one of the most successful things with Legion is they put a lot of effort into class fantasy, right?
Oh, it was
And
great. That
like
was
even
role
though I
playing
don't
professional.
agree with all of the things they did and I don't necessarily love the
No.
systems and stuff, at the end of the day it felt unique to be a warlock again. Like it kind
Yeah.
of it mattered what choices you made in terms of like how you were going to like initially at least when you were leveling up your Azerite weapon, what progression tree you chose when you didn't have everything available to you. So it felt like you had choice. It
Yeah,
felt like your
exactly.
decisions actually mattered, and it felt like that you were unique to the role that you made. I think the biggest problem with BFA is I'm playing an MMORPG and I feel like everyone else.
Yeah, it's very true.
Like
Well,
I'm
I
a
mean,
warlock, but like I have
especially
a
with
battle res,
alts,
which
you
I
know what
didn't
I
have
mean?
originally, but so do
Yeah,
druids. So do like
right.
how many battle reses are there in the game now? Like too
There's
many.
hunters. They're not hunters. There's engineers.
Yeah, hunters had it
And
once upon a time. There's the engineering
but
toy.
that's
There's
gone. But the
warlocks.
engineering
There's
tool.
death knights. There's druids. Like you've got all those different things. Summoning, right? It used to be a thing that literally only warlocks can do. You can still only do it as a warlock in a raid, but all you got to do is step outside and click on the dumb stone, and surprise, surprise, no warlock required. Like
Right.
hellstones are all well and good, but like at least finally they don't fucking share a cooldown with health pots. That they used to do that, so hellstones weren't
Yeah.
even worthless. Like the things that made like the crazy thing that I think people won't realize is like if you're looking at warlocks on retail and you're like I'm gonna go over, I'm gonna play a warlock because I want to do fat DPS.
Dude,
Good
you're
luck.
just basically a yeah, you're basically just there to
Stay
bring
safe.
hellstones and
Well,
yeah,
yeah, Stay Safe, who's a Warlock main who played on private servers and stuff and has talked about it repeatedly. People are like, how good are Warlocks in Classic? He goes, if you're looking at a raw DPS on a scale of 1 to 10, and Molten Core Warlocks are a 3. And then by the time you get to Naxxramas, they bump themselves up to a 7 because Warlocks have one of the better progression paths in terms of damage. But you will never be the top of your damage meters, and early on, you are not very good at doing damage.
right,
But you are there because you have health stones, which people don't
right.
have. You're the only one that can summon. You have soul
Yeah,
stones, which are a unique idea. And the all important Curse of Elements, Curse of Shadows, something that's been removed from the game. I throw Curse of Elements on something, and now I'm increasing
yeah.
all damage taken from fire and frost to that boss by 8%. Guess who does frost and fire damage?
Mm,
Warlocks and mages
that's
and
right,
shaman.
baby. Yeah.
like and there may be some spells that are hidden within the kit that do other things along those lines. Curse of Shadows, guess who does that? Other warlocks, but so do shadow priests. I think there's
Yeah.
some shadow damage locked up in rogues, I want to say.
Yeah.
Like you provide these buffs that are buffing everybody else, so you're bringing
Right.
utility that nobody else can, that the raid needs.
Right.
um,
And
and that doesn't
there's
really, I don't feel that
not
in
as
live.
much of that anymore, you know?
Yeah,
There's like
everybody does everything, so now you no longer feel unique.
all right, right. It's a hard balance to walk, I'm sure, but um we could go on and on. I think we should probably look at wrapping this up with some grand summations. I mean, there are other things you could talk about, like modern day classics going to be interesting with the internet and with streamers and with
Yeah, streamers
add-ons
didn't
or
exist back then.
capabilities. Like, it's going to be weird. I think people are going to be really good at the game. I think in some ways the game's going to be super easy, and some ways the game's going to be challenging to a modern sensibility as far as a gamer,
Well, that's something to briefly
So,
touch on too. Is like you look at top end guilds back then, and we were making it up as
right.
we went. Like I don't know. Like maybe it existed, but like a site like Raidbots or Simulation Craft and stuff like that, that wasn't a
Yeah, yeah.
thing that you necessarily did back then. A lot of it was theory crafting. You'd like look at it, you try a bunch of shit, and the ability to respec became really expensive. So you kind of went with something and you made it work as best you could. Like
Yeah, I loved that feeling of just kind of like, I mean, that's what I love about the talents. In fact, I was gonna say, like, if there was like the one little distillation you could say that you're most excited about in classic or whatever,
individuality, man. I love the
I
uniqueness,
love
and the
picking the
talent tree leads right
talents.
into
I,
that. Well, then it gives you options
I
because
love
even
picking one. I just love it. I
even
love
though
it.
there are obviously best builds when you're min maxing, this is the one you want to go for.
Yeah,
You
but it's
have the
so
option
cool.
to do like depending on what you're doing. Like if you're gonna do
Yeah,
because it costs like if you do respecking enough, eventually it costs 50 gold to respec. That's fucking
yeah,
expensive, right?
which is
That's
ridiculous, right?
insane. So like if
But
you know that you're
it's
gonna
so
be a PvPer and a raider, yeah, even though like SM Ruin or whatever may be the very best build possible for a warlock in any given phase, I may choose to deviate slightly because I want this ability for PvP, while still providing the utility I'm required to provide in Raid. So like you make these tweaks to customize your gameplay experience, and at the end of the day, you play the game you want to, as opposed to now. I have 3 talent choices that I can change literally whenever I want for effectively for free, and most of them feel relatively unimpactful or are so bad that you literally never use them. Like they're like, oh, we wanted to give the choice to the players because of these cookie cutter talent builds. Now you actually have options. I feel like we have less options now than we did back then, even though there were those builds or whatever. So I'm
Right.
excited.
Right.
For, like the thing I'm the most excited about to get back into WoW is again the role playing individual feel. Like
Yeah.
everybody's journey is their own. Everyone's choices in terms of how they build their characters is their own. Everyone's
Right.
gearing options and stuff is their own. Yes, there's some things that are better than others, but at the end of the day, other than on this realm where we literally all have the same gear when you're looking at tier gear and stuff, every single person's experience, how they got there, the gear they're wearing, the things they choose to do is going to be different.
And
And you're going to
I
feel
hope we can.
valued in a 40-man raid group because you're going
Yeah.
to bring something that somebody else doesn't, and everyone complements each other. And at the end of the day, the goal isn't to be the top DPS. The goal isn't to be the 99% parse. The goal is to fucking kill Rag and hope that he drops the thing for the Sulfuros hammer, to go in there and bring down Gar and try to get part of the Thunder Fury, to go into Naxxramas and to clear bosses and to kill KT. Like that's the goal. Like it
Yeah.
was much less driven by DPS and individual egos, and it was more about the community experience and trying to accomplish an end game thing. And I'm excited
I
for
hope we
that.
can maintain that, with just how many metric systems and abilities we have to know what the absolute best numbers are. And I think about that, when I'm expecting, raiders in my raid to come and have their best, understand their loadouts and their best stuff and everything. And I hope Classic can kind of maintain that. Like, this is what there's flexibility and there's different, ways to play it, and it's not all end all be all. Just like
I
everyone
mean,
just needs to be doing their job. You know what I
super,
mean?
super,
Like,
super high end guilds are going to have like very, very restrictive spots, and they're going to expect you to do exactly X, Y, or Z because their
right,
goal is to be world first, whatever. But the rest of the guilds that are just trying to muddle their way through and eventually get to Nax, like given enough time, like you're going to be able to go in there with, almost anything and find a raid spot. And as long as you're willing to put in the time that's required, which is quite a
right,
bit, you're going to
right,
be able to fulfill a raid spot. And you're going to be able to
right,
eventually get where you
right.
want to go.
So on a scale of 1 to let's see, 113, which is my current fishing level, how excited are you?
For Classic,
Yeah.
as excited as a man can be. I have been waiting for this for a long time. Like, I can neither confirm or deny experiences on numerous private servers just to
Trying to.
recapture momentary feels of nostalgia and classic stuff.
But this feels pretty good as far as like this is
Yeah,
the
this feels like spot on.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
I
it's
maxed out
good.
my fishing a long time ago. Yeah, I've been 75 for a while, just fishing up nothing because I just don't
Dude, I
care.
went and I
This
went
tune
and
this
bought.
tune is gonna die in like a day, so who
I
cares?
know. I'm trying to max it. What's max?
300.
No, that's not gonna happen.
You can't even do it in org. The trainer's not here.
Oh yeah. I could only go journeyman here.
Yeah, you can get
Well, let's
150, I
review.
think.
What'd you catch?
20, 40, 60, 80, 113 raw long jaw snapper or mud snapper. I've
Really?
got
I like that.
23 raw bristle whisker catfish. No, 43. There's 20 I missed there. I've got 8 raw brilliant small fish. Oh,
Ooh.
28. There's 20 there. I caught a 19-pound catfish offhand.
Oh my gosh, really?
Boom, there he is in my hand.
Let me see this.
My offhand, in my left hand. Can you not see him?
No.
You don't see the fish?
No. I really don't. There it is. Okay, it wasn't there before. Dude, nice fish. That's a big old fish.
And I
I
got
did
a
not.
lesser mana potion, apparently.
I did too.